and a hush grows over the room. Ooh, what a mic. Hi, everyone. Hello. It's a rainy night, but not in here. I want to welcome you to the Jeff MacNelly Lecture, the 212th 2012 Political Campaign Through the Lens of a Comedy Writer. I'm Susan King. I'm the Dean of the School of Journalism and Mass Communication. And to paraphrase Dorothy, Togo, we're not in 111 Carroll Hall tonight. Yes, this isn't exactly your traditional distinguished lecture at the J School, but I think we're in for a pretty terrific night, and I'm glad you're all here. We had a sellout crowd, and so those people who didn't want to do standing room were in trouble because they would have gotten a seat, right? A little bit. We are here to honor tonight not one graduate, but two of our graduates, two great graduates, Jeff MacNelly and Bryan Tucker. And most of all, we're here tonight to honor creativity. Some people don't think of the J School as being the home of creativity, but amidst the facts and the evidence and the telling of truth, there is a lot of creativity. And I at least hope a dollop of strategy and a load of laughter. Journalism and mass communication is about passion. Passion for ideas and connections and networking and politics and policy and hypocrisy, and most of all, today. We're about the news. We're about a school who cares about their time and understanding what makes people tick and what makes their decade so interesting. That's what draws people, I think, to this kind of a school. So let me tell you a little bit about the big names tonight. First, Jeff MacNelly, who was not here in person, but who's very much here in spirit. The lecture is named after him, and on the windows along this wall, you see some of the cartoons that Jeff MacNelly did when he was a student here and when he was with the Daily Tar Heel. He was the editorial cartoonist. He was at the school in the 1960s, and he came from New York City and a family full of journalists. His father ran an advertising firm and was also the publisher of the famed Saturday Evening Post. First clue, it doesn't exist anymore. His mom was a retired journalist, and while at the school, Jeff was at the Daily Tar Heel. He was a sports editor and an illustrator, but no surprise, he also specialized in satire. He was so good at the Daily Tar Heel that the Chapel Hill Weekly, a local newspaper at that time, offered him a job, a real job, and real money. So he left school, and he became a full-time person at the Chapel Hill Weekly. And the most important experience for McNally, not only was he getting a paycheck, and he won later on 3 Pulitzer Prizes for editorial cartoons, but he had a mentor when he was at this paper, and it was the editor of the Chapel Hill Weekly, and his name was Jim Shoemaker. He was also a professor at the J School. And if you ever read the history of the J School, you'll find he has quite a personality. Jeff's famous cartoon character, you'll see some of the pictures, was named after this professor. It's called Shoe. At its height, that cartoon was syndicated in 950 newspapers. It had millions of readers. Everybody followed Shoe. McNally was voted into the halls of fame. Not only did he win all those Pulitzer Prizes, but he came into our halls of fame in North Carolina in 1985. And unfortunately, we lost Jeff MacNelly way too early in the year 2000 after a fight with lymphoma. But Jeff's magic as an editorial cartoonist lives on in the work of our students, in those who he loved, and in the spirit of a lot of UNC grads, like Bryan Tucker, who you're going to listen to tonight. His creativity and journalistic roots, like McNally, led him to the big time. Bryan Tucker did stand-up comedy right here on Franklin Street, and his comedy partners are here in the front row, but you have to wait to meet them. He was an undergrad, and that's what he loved doing. So what do you do when you're undergrad and wants to do stand-up comedy? You go to the J School. But he was really fascinated by communication in our society. And though he spent most of his time hanging out in clubs, comedy clubs during his undergrad years, there was nothing frivolous alone in this. He met his now wife right here, who was then his UNC girlfriend. Rachel is a 1996 graduate of the Keenan Flagler Business School. Yeah, she had a strategy for success. She recognized talent, but she knew she needed a job. But she had a penchant for laughter, and she couldn't resist him. Well, Bryan toured the comedy circuit for a number of years, some locally here, and then to great success. He played Caroline's Comedy Club and the Gotham Comedy in New York City, two tough locations, I will tell you that. He was at the Improvisation in Hollywood and the Laugh Factory in LA. 500 shows under his belt, but who was counting? Then he wanted to make something that was stable. He got a television job, Chris Rock show, then Chappell's show. I didn't watch enough of that. I was doing the news business, so I wasn't watching comedy. Then he got onto a program that was really destined to change his life. It's defined Saturday night, not for one generation, but now numbers of generations. It's almost 40 years old. Saturday Night Live is where Bryan is now as a writing supervisor. That means Bryan is in charge of chaos, making minute-to-minute decisions, figuring out every week what the big joke is going to be, how to coach big-time politicians and actors, and how to sell a joke, sometimes on themselves, and always driving toward a Saturday, and this season, also a Thursday night deadline. For him, he has to simply make it all work. Oh, and they make it look so easy. For me, Saturday Night Live is really important. It saved my marriage. I will tell you why. I worked Saturday nights for a number of years. I worked until midnight. My husband was not thrilled with that at that time, but when I got home, Saturday Night Live was just sort of starting, and it got us to laugh through those years. We survived my weekend work and that television side of the business, and we continue to watch Saturday Night Live now. From John Belushi to Gilda Radner to Will Ferrell and Tina Fey and the current talented team, Saturday Night Live has changed with the times. That's been its success. It has mocked and satirized leaders from Ford to Obama. They've become as important to the political year as the League of Women Voters. Oh my God, that would embarrass them. And as important as the debates. Who can think of a long political season without the creativity and the comedy of the smart, well-informed satirists of America, the team at SNL? 4 years ago, it was hard to tell who was more real, Sarah Palin or Tina Fey's SNL version of her. SNL takes risks and makes America laugh. It takes politics and finds the satirical truth in a candidate's positions, the hypocrisy of message making, and the power of personality. To understand 2012, SNL is de rigueur. As they say in those clubs, will you put your hands together now and welcome our 93 grad, our own Bryan Tucker.
Thanks so much. Can you hear me? Let me test that out first. Am I all right? You want to? How am I doing there? I always start off with someone checking my butt. It's just something that good. I hope that's there we go. How's that? Thank you, Colin. And thanks so much to Dean Susan King for such a nice introduction. I really appreciate that. Dean King and I have met and hung out a few times, and she must know me pretty well because we're having this at a bar. So I appreciate that. I really like what you said about my wife Rachel too, that she knew he had talent, but she had to have a job. Sound like a lyric from a disco song, which I enjoyed. I wrote a speech here. I'm going to give you the speech, but I'll just tell you just in general, talk about the speech. We have a few clips to show you, and then I'll even take questions. So we'll get right into it. I guess first of all, I also should say that I want to thank Speed Hallman and Kyle York for helping me out and helping put this together. We had a good day today talking to some students, maybe some are here today. It's nice for me to see how far this school has come. When I was here, the school was in Howell Hall, which I've asked many students today what happens in Howell Hall, and no one seems to know. I guess the best answers I got were that it was a termite sanctuary or a drunk tank for Duke students who come to Chapel Hill and overdo it because there's nothing to do in Durham. Is that? It's also great to see how every classroom in Carroll has computers for everybody, and all the technology that has come into play with new media. When I was in Howell, and this is totally true, it was the first time I ever saw a laser printer. The entire school used one, and it ran on coal. So that's what happened. It's also great to be here to honor Jeff MacNelly, whose family is here tonight. I grew up in Richmond, Virginia, and my parents got the Richmond Newsletter, which was Jeff's home paper in the 1970s. The Newsletter was the afternoon paper at a time when a medium-sized city like Richmond could still have 2 newspapers. My parents would read the news after they came home from work, consuming it in large, slow gulps, instead of the way most of us get our news today, which is watching it on mute at the gym, as a blonde lady from Fox News talks and the headline underneath reads, "Mexicans, are they contagious?" While my parents were reading the paper, I would get the comic section as a kid. Every day I would read Bloom County and Doonesbury and Shoe, which even at age 8 I thought were a bit smarter and more savvy than the other comics. Except for, of course, the occasional Family Circus where Billy would debate Jeffy about bioethics, which was... Then he would do that adorable thing where he walks around in a circuitous dotted line. I came into UNC wanting to be a journalist, but I probably was not cut out for that. My fundamentals were terrible. In 1991, over 150 students took the spelling and grammar test, and I got the lowest score out of all of them. That is true. I believe you needed a 70 to pass. I got a 36. That is true. I told everyone that who I was still learning English after years of speaking my native language, Farsi. It took me 4 times to pass that test. I don't know if I might have the record in this room. I started my journalism classes 1 semester late because of that test. Since then, I've learned that they have eliminated the spelling part of the exam, and now it focuses on word usage. So to many of the students here tonight who did not have to worry about the spelling part, to all of you I would like to say, screw you guys. Just wanted to get that out of the way. But you know what? I got through it. I wrote features for the Daily Tar Heel. I did a few radio stories for WCHL. I worked as an intern at the Virginia News Network. Ultimately, I did not pursue a career in journalism because I found out quickly that while all my J-School peers wanted to dig down deep into the issues we all face, I wanted to tell jokes about my ding-a-ling. It was only years later when it started to sink in how much the lessons I got from the journalism school helped me in my alternative career. Professors like Raleigh Mann and Jim Shoemaker helped me learn to write clearly and concisely, which actually helps in writing jokes. Professor John Bittner taught me how to find what's important about an issue and highlight that, which helps when writing topical sketches. And Professor Phil Meyer taught me that it was okay to be creative and get to the root of something, even if that meant breaking the traditional rules of journalism. So I thank them. Brevity and clarity are important in all writing, but especially in joke writing. My first comedy job was sending freelance jokes to David Letterman. I got on what's called a fax list, where I would fax in jokes, and if you got a joke on, they sent you $125. The second joke I ever got on Letterman went like this. Scientists have just successfully cloned a pig. Wow. You know what that means? More pigs. I'm not sure why that's funny, but I think the brevity of it has something to do with it. Now, I don't write as many jokes as I do sketches, and again, my journalism background comes into play on that. Sketches about current events are like an editorial cartoon. First, you have to figure out what it's about, or what we call your premise. Then you communicate that premise by building characters and jokes around it. And like an editorial cartoon, if people don't find it accurate, it won't resonate with them and they won't enjoy it. Write a sketch about Mitt Romney going to McDonald's for the first time in his life and pretending to like it for the TV cameras, and it will probably connect with your audience. Write a sketch about Mitt Romney as a guy who's leading a drum circle at Burning Man, and it probably won't. Although there's no question it would be quite entertaining, and maybe we should have done that sketch. I've been writing political sketches at SNL for about 8 years, less than head writer Seth Meyers, who's been at it for 12. Far, far less than one of our veteran head writers, a guy named Jim Downey, who's been doing it for 37, since, I guess, 1976. Jim is still one of our best writers, and he wrote an election-based piece this year that I think was a highlight, and I wanted to show it to you, if you don't mind. I'll talk about this later, but one thing that we kind of figured out what to do, or we kind of thought was a good idea, was not only to write about the actual candidates, but to write about the issues around the candidates. So here is soon. So that was a good example of taking less about directly parodying something that already happened and kind of taking a general issue that everyone was thinking about and playing on that, which we found worked very well this election because there were several, but there were fewer than normal moments that everyone was talking about. Much of the political satire you saw this year had a lot to do with Jim Downey, who wrote that, and Seth Meyers, but I was also involved, and I learned a few things. First of all, here's a tip. If you see a political candidate on SNL, they're probably not winning. They might not be losing, but they're not winning. When a candidate is way ahead, he or she doesn't need to take a chance on coming on national TV and having Amy Poehler rap about them while they throw their hands in the air like this. In 2008, John McCain came on Saturday Night Live 3 days before the election and participated in a sketch where he was auctioning off all his items from his campaign on a home shopping type channel. That was a bad sign. This year, the election was so close that neither candidate needed to make an appearance. Instead, we got an offer from Michelle Obama, who had already been on The Tonight Show, Jimmy Fallon, Good Morning America, and a very special episode of Honey Boo Boo. So we weren't her first priority. Another thing I've learned is that sometimes you, as a comedy writer, are given a gift that makes your job a lot easier. When Newt Gingrich said he wanted to put a colony on the moon, that was a gift for us. When Joe Biden had a biker lady sit on his lap and whispered in her ear while massaging her shoulders, that was a gift for us. The biggest gift in my 8-year tenure at SNL was when John McCain picked a vice presidential running mate who happened to look a whole lot like one of the best comedians that SNL ever had. Tina Fey was not dying to play Sarah Palin, but she couldn't stop the momentum. She said she would try it once and see how it went. Seth Meyers wrote a piece with her and Amy Poehler as Hillary Clinton, and Tina added jokes to help make it hers. Of course, as you know, it was a hit, and after that she had no choice. She was now Sarah Palin. She had to follow all the way through to the 2008 election and beyond. I remember sitting in the writer's room back then and watching Katie Couric do that disastrous interview with Sarah Palin. And I remember I showed it to Tina, and a bunch of us writers all gathered around together, and we just sat there stunned at her, but elated that this was going to be something. And after one of Palin's answers came out as complete nonsense, there were a lot of jokes being thrown around about what we got to do with this. But Tina said, we should just repeat what she said. I don't know how you could even parody that. So when SNL did the piece a few days later, Tina answered Katie Couric's question about the 2008 economic meltdown by saying, and I'm going to quote you verbatim, here it is, but ultimately what the bailout does is help those that are concerned about the health care reform that is needed to help shore up our economy, it's got to be all about job creation too. to shore up the economy and putting Fannie and Freddie back on the right track, and so health care reform and reducing taxes and reining in spending. So we've got to accompany tax deduction with tax relief for America, also having 1 in 5 jobs created under this umbrella of job creation, that and also. And that got the biggest reaction of any of the jokes that we worked so hard on. And that's the best example I can give you of what is a gift. I'll tell you my favorite Sarah Palin story of when she was at SNL, which kind of gives you some insight into her personality. She was so glad to be there, and was meeting everybody and was introducing her family to everybody and really was enjoying kind of absorbing all the attention and stuff. And I remember Bobby Moynihan, who was in his 2nd or 3rd show that time, was playing a moose that would dance around during Amy Poehler's Sarah Palin rap. And he had on his moose head, and he was walking by her in the hallway and had never met her and had his moose head on. And Sarah Palin was walking by, and she went, and a bunch of people were watching, and she went, "Hey there, moose!" And he turned around and she went, "Patow!" And everybody laughed. And I just thought, this person is probably more made for TV and media than she is for politics. It turned out that we were right. In 2012, we didn't have quite as many gifts. There was no Sarah Palin. Donald Trump had decided not to run, which was a shame. And there was no one running for president on the ticket called "The Rent is Too Damn High" party. Instead, we had Obama, who traffics in cool, which makes him very hard to parody. And we had Mitt Romney, one of the most aggressively white people in America. As you might guess, parodying Barack Obama has not been easy for SNL, and not really for any comedy show. He's a guy who rarely makes public mistakes, and he keeps his emotions tamped down, so that very little of his personality shines through. We would make light of this side of him, but it's hard to base a comedy sketch on the premise, "Whoa, that guy is crazy composed." So instead, what we did was we surrounded him with other people that might highlight what he's about. We did a sketch where he was at a rally where we slowly discover that every person at the rally with him is unemployed. Or we did a town hall full of weird Long Island types asking him ridiculous questions, which was much like the actual town hall. And this allows us to make fun of the issues around Obama while mostly keeping him the cool center of it all and not necessarily focusing on his personality. And thank goodness for Joe Biden, a guy whose emotions were anything but tamped down. Joe Biden would probably hug you while crying if you gave him a free Twizzler. One great way to get comedy out of character is to give him an attitude, and Joe Biden always had an attitude. If he was a little mad during the debate on SNL, we'd make him furious. If he was slightly dramatic during a speech, we'd make him turn into an emotional wreck. If Joe was in the news, it was a happy week on SNL. He was the unpredictable Barney Fife to Obama's composed, easygoing Sheriff Taylor. Mitt Romney was also enjoyable this year for the SNL writing staff. First of all, we had Jason Sudeikis playing him, and Jason's goal when he plays any celebrity is just to have fun. Jason does not approach doing impressions in a clinical way, watching everything the person does and then meticulously trying to imitate them. That is the territory of cast members like Daryl Hammond, Bill Hader, and now Jay Farrow, who all do brilliant impressions. Jason he kind of comes from the Dana Carvey, Bill Murray school, where he finds something he thinks is fun about the person, then he magnifies it as much as possible, with less of a copy and more of a caricature. With Mitt Romney, it was his aloofness. Here was a rich guy who had never had to deal with regular people, and he's suddenly thrown into a place where he had to pretend to enjoy eating a corn dog at the Iowa State Fair. I personally remember one aha moment where I kind of figured out what was funny about Mitt Romney. And you can see this video on YouTube. Mitt Romney, it's during the primaries. He's in Jacksonville taking pictures with a group of black Boy Scouts and their parents. And they're all kind of dressed in winter clothes, and he quickly greets them and stands in front of the group while the cameras take pictures, and he says, "Come on, everybody, who let the dogs out, huh? Who let the dogs out? All right." I promise you can see that on YouTube. There are a lot of reasons why Mitt Romney lost the election, but one of them is he lost the vast majority of the minority vote, including 90% of black voters, over 90%, I think. And I believe this is because deep inside, he's a guy who really, really wants to know who did let the dogs out. He's not sure. Another one of those unexpected election gifts happened during the Republican convention when Clint Eastwood debuted his magic chair. After 2 days of watching pageantry that was meticulously choreographed down to the last detail, it was refreshing to see a grumpy 82-year-old dude just get up there and wing it. I remember watching with a couple of SNL friends, and someone yelled out, "Live TV isn't so easy, is it?" All of us knew this moment would be ripe for some kind of comedy. We already had Bill Hader, who did a great Clint Eastwood and had in the past. The problem was that SNL did not have its first show for another 2 weeks. So we watched as The Daily Show, Colbert, The Tonight Show, Letterman, and the entire internet mercilessly pounded the subject into the ground while we sat on the sidelines. Tackling subjects with immediacy has become a greater problem the longer I've stayed at SNL. We as a country still have our water cooler moments, but instead of talking about them at the water cooler the next day, we talk about them on our cell phones minutes after they happen. During the second debate, Mitt Romney made a comment about binders full of women. By the time the debate was over, the phrase binders full of women was the third most searched phrase on Google. That's true. And something named binders full of women had its own Twitter account. And this is before both men had stopped talking that night. There wasn't a new Saturday Night Live for another 4 days, so we had two choices. We could let the comment go and find other things to make fun of, which we eventually did, or we could try our best to find a new way to make fun of it. And we took the latter approach with Clint Eastwood. Instead of merely commenting on what happened, Seth Meyers took a look into the future and wrote a promotion for a new touring show called Clint Eastwood and Chair, where Clint Eastwood and a chair take their act on the road. Yes, it was already well-worn territory by now, but it was a take that no one had done yet, and it's a sure bet that everyone will be happy to see Bill Hader playing Eastwood as a cranky guy with his pants up to his nipples. And here is that clip. Whenever we have, in the last 2 years, whenever we've had a promo for some kind of theater-y Broadway show, we always end it with Taran Killam and that character doing something like, "The bitch owned it." That's kind of his new thing. So, if the gifts in this election were fewer than the past ones, we as writers had to do more work. And one of the ways we found comedy was to broaden our focus past the candidates. We would make fun of super PAC-funded campaign commercials. We would mock the self-righteous but ignorant undecided voters, like that clip you just saw, or previously. And we would always make fun of the media, because people love when you make fun of the media. One of the nice things about not going into a career in journalism is that I get to make fun of the media even while I'm in the media. It's my own little hypocrisy treat. So after the first debate where Barack Obama temporarily went into a fugue state, we not only did a sketch about the actual debate, we also made fun of MSNBC's reaction to the debate. If writing jokes about Obama was challenging, then it was easier to write jokes about Al Sharpton compensating for Obama by saying he was poisoned by the Denver altitude, adding, "You see, in Denver, Colorado is a mile high, so there's no way to know how many feet that is. It could be upwards of 1 million. It's just a lot more fun. And of course, we could always go to Fox News, where you can bet that there was something ignorant and hilarious going on 24/7. 2 nights after Hurricane Sandy, I was wondering if we should do another of our Fox and Friends sketches where we make fun of the morning crew on Fox News. We had just done one a few weeks ago, and I didn't want to run it into the ground. I thought, haven't these dummies been picked on enough? Then I saw a clip from the previous morning where Fox News personalities Steve Doocy and Eric Bolling were talking about an upcoming Hurricane Sandy benefit featuring Bruce Springsteen, Christina Aguilera, and Bon Jovi. Bolling pointed out that all the musicians there were known Democrats, and he wondered if this was a secret Obama rally in disguise. If it was a piece of sinister propaganda, the producers did an incredible job making it look like an actual charity concert for the thousands of victims of the hurricane. The concert even raised millions of dollars for the Red Cross just to add to its brilliant but evil ruse. And after I watched this Fox and Friends clip of them talking about that, I thought, yes, let's do the sketch, please. That fact checker, we've done this sketch maybe 5 times, and every time we always roll, the fact checkers have combed through the show and they have some facts. I really enjoyed writing the first one, and it's just so fun that now we just all get together, all the writers get together for about an hour, and we throw out like 50 of them and then pick like the 15 best. My favorite in that one was Chris Crosty is not Governor Chris Christie with his pants on backwards. And Louis C.K. does a great job there of just reacting. You know, you don't consider him like a guy who's a good straight man, but you know, most of the laughs come from just cutting to him and him just being confused and a little worried. Here we go. One of the great things about going into comedy instead of journalism is we don't have to follow the rule found most often in cable news that we must have a relentless pursuit of balance, even at the expense of facts or common sense. Is climate change real? We'll have both viewpoints coming up next. Can we keep all of our entitlements and also not raise taxes? We'll discuss both sides now. Your ass in a hole in the ground. Are they different? We'll hear both arguments after the break. Instead, SNL writers get to put out what we see as the truth and let the audience decide if they agree. And if they don't agree, it's pretty likely the sketch will bomb and it won't make it past dress rehearsal. And Bryan Tucker will be alone in his office drinking bourbon, wondering what the hell would happen that week. Another nice thing about being a comedy writer is it's our job to make current events fun. While traditional news outlets are struggling to make their content more exciting and palpable to young audiences, shows like SNL, The Daily Show, and Colbert are already 2 steps ahead because entertaining people is our first priority. But I should emphasize, if you only get your news from late-night comedy shows, you're probably not doing yourself a lot of good. It would be like only eating dessert for dinner every time. Still, I'll admit, it's very nice to work in the dessert aisle. When professional journalists watched the past vice presidential debate, they were looking for accuracy and insight into future policy. SNL writers watched the vice presidential debate wondering if we could put Paul Ryan in an Eddie Munster outfit. And people have asked me this today, should you go into comedy writing instead of a traditional journalism career? My instinct is no. Now that everyone has a cell phone and a camera and a blog, anyone can be a journalist, but so few people can be good journalists, and that's what they're training you to do here. I rarely get a fresh perspective on the world solely on my own. It's people like David Brooks and Ezra Klein and Fareed Zakaria that help me do that. And when I was growing up, it was people like David Broder and Molly Ivins and, yes, Jeff MacNelly who helped me understand the world better because they enhanced it with their own point of view. And as we get more and more information, it will be even more important to have people around who will understand what's important about all that information we get and then communicate it back to us accurately. And that is your challenge. In the meantime, I'll be over here in the corner pointing and laughing and writing jokes about my ding-a-ling. So thank you very much.
Before we get the questions, we want to have it. I just want to do a couple of things. First, before you all get to a method, we have something for you, which we thought you would really like, and you mentioned it. We wanted you to have your own picture of Howell Hall, done by Jeff MacNelly.
Wow, that's
so
great.
recognizing this night. So this has been a picture we were lucky enough to have that Jeff did of Howell Hall years ago when we had it framed. We have the original in the school, but we thought you'd like to have.
That's great. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
And I just wanted to introduce
Put this in my office.
a couple of people in here. First, Melinda Barlett, would you just stand? Where are you, Melinda? Back there. Melinda's back there. Her husband was one of the great editorial cartoonists as well, and a great Jeff friend. He lived in Greensboro, North Carolina, and also left us way too early. Thanks for being here, Melinda. Is Wyatt West here? Where's Wyatt? Okay. Jeff's roommate, son is a student here, and we were hoping to, he wanted to be here tonight as well. But we do have Danny McNally, Jeff's son. Would you just stand up for a second? And his mom, Rita, will you stand up for that? The spirit is very much alive here. And the smart side of this family, Rachel's mom and dad are here. Would you please stand up, Judd and Joe Nunn, who always knew we had talent and would also be a great sport. But I think also most important to all of you who are students, the two guys that he went on the road with. Oh, wait, Jeff MacNelly's roommate, were you his? Got all the pictures. He was the Tar Heel editor when Jeff was there, so he learned he was going to be here tonight. Can't wait. But I think what's amazing is Bryan, when he left, I heard him telling some of the students today, he went on the road with a group of guys, and they were called the Selected Hilarity, and they did it for a number of years. They're still good friends. Had dinner tonight. They get together all year, and their kids call themselves the Comedy Cousins. Will you two stand up, Alex? Who laughed at all your jokes?
They did.
They are really good. The people you make friends with here will remain friends of yours for life, and hopefully you'll be in pursuit of either the truth or laughter, one or the other. So who wants to ask the first question? Good. You see, we started here first. For your second.
Hi, my name is Riley. I'm a sophomore in school journalism. You said you draw a lot from the news. Just how much of your material do you get from the news?
I mean, in general, SNL always tries to do absolutely one topical sketch that's usually our cold open, and usually we try to do 2 or 3. Sometimes they might just be from the world of entertainment or something like that, but there's absolutely an effort to talk about what's going on in the world. Maybe an exception to that are things like our Christmas show or our Mother's Day show, which are just a little bit more about having fun and entertaining. But I would say at least 2 and sometimes 3 or 4.
Hi, I'm Alex. I'm a senior in high school. What was your process like getting the job at SNL? Did they make you perform stand-up or turning writing circles, or did they just kind of do it together?
I already had, a decent career writing comedy by then. I had written for Chris Rock Show, Mad TV, Tough Crowd with Colin, Quinn, and Chappelle Show. I've been writing professionally for about 6 years on television. And because Chappelle Show was so acclaimed, and because the co-creator of it, Neil Brennan, was a good friend of SNL. He recommended me, and that recommendation carried a lot of weight. I would not have gotten it. I had to submit a writing packet of 5 to 7 sketches, but I had a lot of momentum going into that job that someone who just submits sketches doesn't have.
My name is Emily Freeman. I'm a senior in the Gotham Comedy Club. Just a question that Jon Stewart and Nicole Beer.
I mean, they're both great. Yeah, I guess more often I watch Jon Stewart just because I feel like they give him the big story, and I always like to see what their take is on the big story. I mean, if it's a story that's so big that both of them will do it, but if it's kind of usually Colbert takes on, especially in his second and third acts, the more minor stories, and Stewart has this is what's going on, and I feel like his is the definitive take. I love them both though, but if I have to watch one instead of the other, it's Jon Stewart.
Hi, my name is Hannah. I'm a Chinese major and a journalism minor. And you mentioned that
in order for something to make it to air, it has to pass, I guess, market research of a dress rehearsal.
Right.
So I look at you guys as someone who's helping me critique the world as it happens, and your point of view is something I value. How much of your point of view or your perspective on the world do you think actually makes it to air? How much of your
My personal?
Yes.
That's a good question. She asked how much of my personal point of view makes it onto the air if all the SNL sketches are kind of market tested by a dress rehearsal audience. Well, I said this earlier to Dean King, but one of the great things about SNL is you're very much, it empowers writers. You get to write your sketch, and if it gets through, you get to produce the sketch, which means you get to talk to the set designers, talk to the costume people. You get to, of course, work with the actors and make sure, work with the host. And what that does is it makes very distinct voices in the show, which also makes for an up and down show. There might be things that you like and there might be things that you don't like because it's a variety show and there's a variety of things. So if a sketch is my sketch, I mostly feel it is my voice. If it's something like a debate sketch, it's what we call a joke bag, which means that we just watch it and we just send in a bunch of jokes from all different writers and just see what's the best ones. And we'll have some of those, but I would say especially the non-current events sketches, you'll see a lot of writers' personal voices on them. So much so that if I didn't work on the show next week, I could watch it and know who wrote what.
Hi, my name is Carnell. I'm a senior in journalism school. And I wanted to know, have you ever heard of any backlash from candidates for the sketches that you do?
Have we ever heard of any backlash from candidates? I think when it depends. I guess the answer is yes, but from minor candidates. When you jump into especially the presidential race, you have to expect that you're going to be parodied, especially on Saturday Night Live. There are, like if we did something on, there was, I had mentioned it before, but there was a guy who ran for mayor of New York on the Rent is Too Damn High party. And this was a guy who lived in a one-bedroom apartment in Brooklyn, really was not necessarily thrusting himself into the public eye, and then we kind of made fun of him because of his look, and perhaps it was not 100% fair to him. He actually loved the publicity of it, but I think people remembered the parody more than they remembered the person because the parody was so great. But I would say, for the most part, we almost never get backlash from big celebrities or big candidates. If we get a backlash, it's because of, it's from a group of people who were offended. And that doesn't affect us all that much.
My name is Jeb. I'm a faculty member in this school. I have two questions. One is about the backlash. Like, I remember you had that Scott Peterson, who was partially blind, and there was a lot of controversy.
Yeah.
And I'll ask my second question after you answer.
Sure. Governor, I guess David Peterson, right? No, that's okay. Fred Armisen played him, and he played him as a blind guy, and we definitely made fun of him being blind, no question. And I think, like I had said before in my speech, kind of the audience tells you if you push it over the line too far. If you're maybe it feels like a personal attack or it's going too far, you feel in the audience that it doesn't get the laughs and you feel people tightening up. The rebuttal to that was that people liked it and it was funny, and the ultimate rebuttal to it was that David Peterson himself came on the show. Patterson, sorry. Patterson himself came on the show, and it just by coming on, it was a tacit endorsement of the character. We heard right away that he didn't like it too much the first time we ever did it, but that's probably as far as we'll push somebody with a handicap, and we would never do that if they weren't in the public eye already. But the fact that it got a lot of big laughs helped it to be a little bit more palatable to the general audience. And I'm sure it offended some people, but often we do that. So, and what was your second question?
As a comedy writer, how has the internet changed your life? Because Saturday Night Live is not Saturday Not Live, and it's not on Saturday night. So
right. Well, he said, how has the internet changed our life? And it is true that most people watch SNL on Sunday or Monday, clicking on their favorite 3 sketches, or watching it on their DVR and fast forwarding through the parts that seem a little dull or not to their taste. I think, actually, I was saying this earlier, SNL somehow retrofitted itself very well into the internet age because it comes in little different, very disparate blocks that last between 2 and 4 minutes, 2 and 6 minutes. It fits right into how people watch media nowadays. I'm sure that was not the intention when it was created in the 70s, but it works very well now. I would say that it's slightly changed our writing in that we do think, we need to make this shorter. Often, if a sketch is 6 to 7 minutes long, that feels prohibitively long. We also, a thing I had mentioned to Dean King was that I'd never thought of this up until the last 3 or 4 years, but we think about music rights. If we put in a sketch on the air that has a song that we can't use the legal rights for, we can put it on television once, but then if they put it on the internet, they have to pay over and over and over again, and so they just choose not to put it on the internet. So often I will write a sketch, and if it involves music, I'll think, can we make this with original music? Does it have to be the actual song? And that was something that I haven't done before. I write a sketch with Jason Sudeikis where a bunch of guys sit around in a bar and they sing a song, and they tell these silly, ribald stories that are jokes. We've done 7 or 8 of those, and none of them have ever been on the internet because we don't have the rights to the music. So, yeah, that's right. We're rehearsing that sketch right now. Yeah. Yes.
Hi, my name is Anne. I'm a junior in middle school. You acknowledged earlier that there are unfortunately people who get their news from SNL.
Yeah.
To what extent do you think that SNL has a responsibility to fix the problem of people who see the parody rather than the person, and what can SNL do to fix the problem?
She asked, a lot of people watch SNL, and that's their main source of news. So basically, what can we do to alter people's perceptions so that they don't think of someone as a parody and they think of them as a real person? I guess, first of all, I would say that's not necessarily our responsibility. It's our responsibility to make fun of them first, and then hopefully trust the audience that they're intelligent enough to know who the real person is. But I do agree that that's a problem. I think, as many people think of Sarah Palin as Tina Fey, Sarah Palin as actual Sarah Palin. Sarah Palin never actually said the line, and I can see Russia from my house, but I'll bet if you ask people on the street, 1/3 to half of them would say, oh yeah, she said that. And sometimes that parody merges into reality. I consider that a victory. I know that's probably the wrong way to go, but like I said, it's our job to be funny and kind of hit a nerve, and that's what I'm thinking about. Yes. Yeah. She asked, we're always doing rewrites up to the last minute, like how does that normally work? We really are. We have the dress rehearsal at 8 o'clock. It usually ends sometime around 10, maybe a little after. In between 10 and 11:30, it is our job to cut the sketch, change the sketch, sometimes rearrange things. Normally, the sketch just gets, if it's good, it gets just a few cuts. Often, we'll add jokes. Rarely, but sometimes, we will totally switch something around. We will recast it. We'll do a different blocking. And so we really are, every sketch that gets on, what you see has really been rewritten within the last half an hour. 1 out of maybe 20 will go up exactly as it did in dress rehearsal, but almost none. It's because during our dress rehearsal, it's the first time we put it up in front of an audience. And so jokes that we thought, this is going to go great, suddenly bomb, and we're like, oh, we got to cut that. And then this doesn't happen quite as much, but every now and then it'll be like, oh, that went great. We need to expand on that, or maybe we'll figure out that just the clarity or the flow of it is wrong, and we'll have to rearrange something. I had said this earlier, but there are also cases. This happens 1 out of every 5 shows where the last sketch of the night. We slowly run out of time, and the last sketch of the night is supposed to be 4 minutes long, and we only have 2.5 minutes of airtime. So the writer will get called down to the control room with about 5 to 10 minutes left in the show and say, I'm sorry, but you need to cut 1.5 minutes out of your sketch. And that is a furious dash. When you think of, what live TV is and kind of the Aaron Sorkin pipe dream of what that is, of people running down hallways, and that is the instance of when that happens. But that also is rare. It's 1 out of every 6 or 7 shows. Way in the back.
Did anybody at NBC push you guys to try to tie in Paul Ryan with the Monsters because we're doing that show?
He asked if anyone, I guess you heard it, but I've been asked to repeat. He asked if anyone at NBC asked us to tie in Paul Ryan with the Munsters, which was an NBC show. It aired once, and then it got canceled. And the answer is no. NBC will sometimes say, oh, it would be great if you could do something on The Voice. It's such a popular show. But they never tell us, this week you have to do The Voice. Lorne Michaels, who runs the show, has set a very independent tone. We definitely talked about Paul Ryan being Eddie Munster, and again, it was one of those things that by the time we were going to make the joke, 3 other people had made it. And one of our writers, a guy named Colin Jost, had a very funny thing. I don't know if you saw the vice presidential debate, but how he played on his widow peak was at the end of the debate. Joe Biden reached over and undid the smudge on his forehead, which we really enjoyed. Yep. Yep. Right? He was asking about race and how you walk the line in terms of being sensitive to it. I guess my feeling is that as a writer, I can put out just what I think is funny and give it to Chris Rock or give it to Dave Chappelle, and if they think it's funny, then they can own it and make it theirs, and that goes a really long way with the audience. When the audience watches it, they don't see, oh, this is Bryan Tucker's idea, and what they see is Dave Chappelle has decided to do this very race-based thing. I think, again, I said this earlier when talking to students, one of the early lessons I learned in terms of writing about race stuff, which because of the shows I've written for, I've kind of dealt with a lot, was my first week of the Chris Rock show, I didn't know what to ask Chris Rock about advice. I wanted to get advice from him, and I said, instead of asking him what I should write, I asked him what should I not write. And one of the pieces of advice he gave me was, don't write black. Write funny, and then I'll make it black. um, which I always thought was a good piece of advice. And it kind of, you kind of have to free yourself from the fear of, oh, I don't know if people are going to like this or not. If you think it's funny, put it out there and then just I mean, there are filters that it goes through. Let the host decide, let the actors decide, and then ultimately let the audience decide. Yeah. Sure. Okay. She asked what the differences were between writing for Chappelle and a more mainstream show like SNL. They're big. The biggest thing was Chappelle's show was very much one, maybe two people's point of view. I had to pitch things to Dave Chappelle, and he had to like them, and then we would do them. And then a guy named Neil Brennan also created that show, also had a big say in the creative process of that. Saturday Night Live is a lot more broadly democratic. We write, every week we write between 2 and 4 sketches. Those sketches get read aloud on Wednesday in a room full of about 75 people. Cast members, the host, Lauren Michaels, and then a bunch of staff, writers, and you know, people who work in all our departments, wardrobe, lighting, everything. And if it goes over well, then you know you have a good sketch in your hands, and that small audience decides. When I would do things for Chappelle's show, I would go in his office and say, how about this, or how about this, and same with Chris Rock's show. And one person got to decide. Chappelle's show also, as you might guess, had a much longer leash in terms of standards. But you kind of self-police yourself. The longer I've stayed at SNL, the more I know what they'll allow and what they won't. You know, I don't. There was more freedom at Chappelle in terms of pitching crazier, dirtier, more racial things. But in many ways, there's also more freedom at SNL because instead of going through one person's filter, you're going through a small audiences. I hated it. She asked how I felt about how it ended. Yeah, it was terrible. I think everyone knew that there were problems with the show, but no one knew that the extent of that it might just suddenly go away. So I came into work that day. He hadn't showed up since yesterday. We kind of closed down the set that we were shooting, and then the producer was with some Comedy Central people and said, all right, we're stopping the show today abruptly, and you know, you're all out of a job, and so go home and we'll figure this out. And you know, it never got figured out. So that was tough. Yeah. I'm not going to elaborate on that. All right. Yep.
Hi, I'm James. Second. I don't know exactly how to put this, but can you talk about your life as a performer and a writer, and kind of your ideas about what it's like to be both, and how you wound up coming from a performing background now? I don't know, do you still perform, or do you still?
Yeah. He was asking the difference between performing and writing in my own personal life. I do still perform. For a long time, I was doing stand-up 3 to 5 days a week, from the late 90s all the way up to 2002, 2003. Now I do a show every 3 or 4 months. I'll do like an SNL Writers Night, a charity show, or my friend's show, but it's mainly just something fun. I like being a writer a lot better. A big reason is because I have a wife and 2 kids, and the lifestyle is just better than touring around and having to win over people all the time. I think, though, most writers on SNL were originally performers, and I would say at least half the writers on The Daily Show were. So many writers on Conan were. Being a performer, especially in late night TV, is pretty, I wouldn't say it's essential, but it's an enormous help. Because you know, you kind of figure out what an audience likes and what the strengths of other performers are. And it's another way to, as you're coming up, to just get a good reputation. It's a whole lot harder to just write down funny things and submit them to someone coldly. it's a lot easier to stand up in front of a group of people and get laughs and get a reputation like that. So I would say that's how most SNL writers get involved with that. I still like performing, but mostly for my own personal ego reasons. But it's also very gratifying to me to have Steve Martin host and have him do a sketch that I wrote. Martin Short is going to host our Christmas show, and I'm really looking forward to that because although I've met him, I've never written something for him. So all that is gratifying as well. Let me get someone who hadn't asked a question yet. Yep. Thanks. I appreciate it. And I'll tell you my role in Chappelle's show. It's not quite as grand. I always was friends with Neil Brennan and lesser extent, but somewhat with Dave when that show was created. And I was a guy who submitted ideas and sketches to them, and they would buy them from me. And then around midway, late in the second season, I got hired full time to come there, but by then I had, at least written the first draft scripts of several things that they did on the show, including like the race draft, which would be top of my resume, and the Player Haters Ball and stuff like that. You would totally associate with me. But now I'm forgetting your question. Yeah. I mean, it was great. Those things don't sink in until later. When you're in it, people liked it, but you don't understand until even years later that people still remember it. I was in a sketch called I Know Black People, where I was on a game show. Maybe you saw that. But every 2 weeks, that sketch was shot in 2003, and every 2 weeks, at least, I'll get somebody coming up to me about that sketch. I think a big reason is because they rerun the hell out of it, but it definitely it shows you what kind of stays with people, and it's very gratifying, and I'm super proud that I got to be a small part, but a part of that. So. I appreciate it. After this is all over, we'll sing it together.
Since that's my TA, now it's a good time to ask this question.
Sure.
I'm in an ethics class, and we have to write a paper about our ideal job, so without breaking honor code, hypothetically, if you were to talk about a situation where there was an ethical dilemma, hypothetically, what would your serious thoughts be, and is there a code of ethics that you follow?
Oh, I wrote a whole paper on it I was going to give you. I guess the answer to that question is I'm not quite sure. Hypothetically, if there was a code of ethics that I had to follow, and hypothetically if I had to break it, I'm going to have to let you show your own work on that. And just, I need to sort of keep going. But it was a good question. It was a good try. Yep. Sure. What's a typical week like for an SNL writer? It's very rigid because it has to all happen exactly, it has to all come together by Saturday. I'll give it to you real briefly. Monday, the host comes in. We all sit in Warren Michaels' office and pitch stuff to the host. We get to meet the host. Tuesday is, for the writers, our hardest day. We write all the sketches. We write collectively, somewhere between 40 and 45 sketches. I come in sometime between noon and 2 in the afternoon, and I stay until sometime between 6 and 8 in the morning. It sucks. We turn them all in. Then Wednesday, sometime between 3 and 4 o'clock, we start what we call our table read. The cast and several producers, Lauren Michaels and the host, all sit at a big table. They read every sketch out loud. It takes 3.5 hours. It's a long process. If your sketch is at the end, you're going to have, it better be funny or you're going to have a hard time. After that, Lauren Michaels, the host, and several producers go in a room and pick somewhere between 9 and 12 of those sketches. I get to participate that in a little bit. I don't get to make the choice, but I get to throw in my opinions. Thursday, the sketches are picked. We start blocking them, each one for camera, and during that we separate the sketches into 2 halves, and we separate our writers into 2 tables. We rewrite them, we cut them, we edit them, we try to add jokes to them. Friday is all day more blocking until somewhere between midnight and 1. Saturday on the afternoon, we do a costume rehearsal where we try to do it 4 times in front of the camera, and then at 8 o'clock the audience comes in for dress rehearsal. We try to do the show just exactly like it is, but with between 20 minutes and a half an hour more. And then we have that little meeting between dress and air. We cut, change things. Somewhere between 1 and 3 or 4 sketches get cut, and then the rest of them get put in order for the show, and we do our very best to make it fun. It doesn't always work, we try.
And Sunday you're off.
Huh?
And Sunday you're off.
And Sunday we have off, which is very nice. We have the whole summer off, and we have weeks like this where we have the whole week off. It's super busy when we're on, but it's nice when we have time off. It's a good amount of time off. Anybody else? Yep. Hello.
What's your favorite sketch that you've written, and what do you think is the worst sketch that you've
Gosh, that's a good one. The second question, I've submitted a lot of really terrible sketches that didn't make it. And right away, you can go, by page 2, you'll be like, oh boy. And if it's an 11-page sketch, it's tough. I co-wrote a sketch for Elton John when he hosted where he had to sing some of his greatest songs in kind of a parody way where he was doing commercials. It was a little bit not a great idea in the first place, but boy did he hate doing that and said it out loud as he was reading, what is this? What's going on? Who wrote this? And that was really terrible. Some of my favorite sketches, a lot of people know the What Up With That sketch that I write with Keenan Thompson and a guy named Rob Klein, and we always have a lot of fun with that sketch. I mentioned it, I guess it's in the DTH today, but the Tim Tebow sketch where Jesus meets Tim Tebow is definitely up there because so many people so many people enjoyed it, and it also made so many people mad. It definitely made ripples, which doesn't often happen with SNL, and in particular with stuff I write. I wrote a sketch, my very first, it wasn't a sketch, it was a Weekend Update feature where they bring characters on the Weekend Update. My very first year where Al Sharpton and Jesse Jackson put Barack Obama on what they called a blackness scale, about if he was more black or less black. They had a whole list of different people who were the most black and who were the least black, and again it was racial, but that went over great, and that was one of the first times, it was probably my 5th show on SNL. It was one of the first times I ever realized, oh, it's okay to write this, and people will laugh, and I might have a place here. And that was, personally I looked at that as a good moment. Did you have a question? Well, before I wanted to circle back, but go ahead. It was my idea to have him dance. I asked whose idea was to have Jason Sudeikis in the red sweatsuit. He and I are friends. I've seen him dance. He's a super funny dancer. And so we thought, why not throw him into this? We kind of together came up with his look, and he had some ideas and I had some ideas, and so we put it together. That's so much his performance. There's no writing in it. It's just him going out and having fun. And it's good. It's fun for me because Jason Sudeikis is known as being such a great straight man, and I really like that he's also known as this wacky dancer guy. way back there. Oh, thank you. Yeah, I love this class. He asked if there's any topics we've written about that the general public has deemed too controversial. Definitely, but I think those sketches get cut at dress, and I guess when you say general public, maybe the dress audience will tell us that. There have been things that I've read that have been a little dirty that people have been a little so-so about. I had said this earlier to some journalism students, but I wrote a sketch about Sheldon Adelson, who's a millionaire backer of several Republicans, including Newt Gingrich, where I had Sheldon Adelson making Mitt Romney dance and stuff, and people did not like that, and that got cut at dress, and it didn't have the laughs in it. So I think I said, like before, you kind of know early if this is too much for an audience. I really am glad that we at least try those things. We have a somewhat long leash there, but normally if it's too much, it gets cut off before it actually gets on television.